I am delighted to be joined by the man that I think is the gold standard of YouTube content creators for the NFL, Brett Kollmann. Brett, I know it's a busy time for you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Ready for the draft to just get here already, to be honest, so I could go back to bed. That'd be great.
Maybe catch up on some of that sleep. It'll take you a month to catch up on all that sleep you're missing, probably.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I got to do post-draft content, so maybe June. Maybe June is what we're shooting for here.
Oh man, well, you need some coffee for sure, right? Well, I want to jump right into it. When we look at this draft class, in your opinion, what would you say are like the three position groups with the most depth and the three position groups with the least amount of depth in this class?
I would say with the most depth, I would go with tight end, edge, and corner.
Okay.
Running back isn't far behind. In fact, running back is right up there with them too. And I guess theoretically, quarterback, just because, in theory, we're 4 to 5 deep with potential starters. Obviously, like 60% of them aren't going to work out statistically. But like in theory, this is a good quarterback
Right.
class as well. So I think this quarterback class, or this draft class in general, gets a bad rap. Because there are some positions that are relatively down, like receiver, like tackle isn't bad, but it's top heavy.
Okay.
Like there's not the same tackle depth that we're used to seeing. And safety is kind of linebackers kind of So I think that, there are some positions that are down. So people consider this entire draft class down, but I mean, there's still going to be 5 tackles drafted in the first round. There's still going to be a bunch of edges drafted in the first 40. There's still going to be 5 quarterbacks that go in the top 40. There's still probably going to be 5 receivers that go, within the first 40 picks. So it's like, I think this draft class is better than people give it credit for, even though there are some positions that are relatively weak and some that are historically strong.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, cornerback, which we'll talk about later, a position the Cardinals need help at, is very deep, which is nice for us, certainly. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are Cardinals related as it pertains to the draft class in terms of fits. And but to start, I want to talk about what the Cardinals are going to be looking to do on offense and defense. So, the Cardinals, head coach Jonathan Gannon hired Drew Petzing as his offensive coordinator. Petzing had been working with Stefanski dating back to 2014 when they were on the Viking staff together. So if we assume that Petzing's offense is going to be influenced by Stefanski, which is sort of that Shanahan, Kubiak sort of school of thought, at least is what some people think, what do we think the Cardinals are going to be looking to do on offense with this coaching staff?
I would say it's a significant chunk of wide zone and inside zone, really a lot of zone-based runs. And then they're always going to have counter in their back pocket as soon as they start seeing like 5 and 6 man services. That's generally how they're going to break out of that, is running counter. And what that really prioritizes to me is an athletic and high quality interior offensive line. You can't run this system without it. Going back to Cleveland, like Cleveland had a stellar interior offensive line for the last few years, with like Pro Bowl caliber guys at all 3 spots. And when the Kubiak system was at its best, well, a couple different times, but going back to like Houston, they had a top 5 center in Myers. They had, young Brandon Brooks was incredible for them. Like you can't run these runs without a kick-ass interior. I think guard at Cardinals is fine, but center definitely needs a lot of help. So I would think that like John Michael Schmitz is like the quintessential Arizona Cardinal in this draft. Like I don't think you can run that system that they want to run without him. So I'm kind of chalking him up for them in the top of the second round. I would say in the passing game, well, I'll stick with the run game for one more second. I think when it comes to running back, you could theoretically run this system with James Conner, but I see him more as like kind of a banger in between the tackles with a lot of the stuff Cliff was doing with like gap scheme, power counter, all that kind of stuff, like get north-south. Like that to me is really where James Conner shines. Keontae Ingram is honestly a better fit for this system, at least what I think this system is going to be. So I think he's going to be the more efficient runner, even if he's not leading them in touches. But that being said, I don't think that Keontae Ingram has the speed to really push the front side of these wide zone calls. So I'm looking at like Israel Abanikanda in like the third round to potentially be, even if he's not like the lead back as a rookie, he's going to be the can opener, right? If we want to run some wide zone stuff and actually threaten the front side, I think it'd be Israel Abanikanda, 217 pounds, 4.3 speed, ridiculously productive, only 20 years old. He checks a whole bunch of boxes for them. In the passing game, mostly play action. It's going to be a pretty high rate of play action, which is probably going to be good for, protecting Kyler. Kyler's not going to be in the field till Thanksgiving, so it'll be Colt McCoy is what I assume. Protecting Colt McCoy a little bit with a whole bunch of play action would be ideal. And then at the receiving core, I don't anticipate Hopkins is going to be there. So it's going to be Hollywood, Rondale, Dortch, Pascal, and insert receiver TBD. And it's going to be deep shots off play action. It's going to be deep crosses. It's going to be yak opportunities, on slide routes and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be classic Shanahan, Kubiak, half field reads off play action, threatening multiple levels of the defense at the same time, which again, McCoy can do just fine. Like I'm not worried about that. So overall, looking at the system, you could just copy and paste the 90s Broncos, the mid 2000s Texans, the Vikings, back when Stefanski was there, the Browns a couple of years ago. Just copy and paste all that stuff, and then that's what Arizona's running.
Right. I want to hone in a little bit on center because that's the need, the biggest need for this team. In my opinion, that's the most important position they have to address in terms of their need. There might be from a positional value perspective, more important positions, but for this team, they've got to get that figured out. They've got Frode Holt right now from Cleveland he could start at a very low end, but they need someone who's a real answer there. And obviously John Michael Schmitz, we're a huge fan of him around, the Cardinal Rule land. And we would love to have him, but if they miss out on him, because there's some people thinking he might go late first round, or if they go in a different direction for whatever reason, when you look at some of the other centers in this draft class, who are centers that would also be a fit for this system? And who are some of the centers that they should probably avoid in terms of scheme fit?
I don't think that there's any that they should avoid.
Okay.
To be honest, it's more so just different flavors of the same ice cream.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of ways to skin a cat when it comes to this run scheme. And even if there are centers like Ricky Stromberg, who's not as quick, I still think that when you look at how Arkansas ran all their zone stuff, they were still very effective because what he lacked in quickness, he made up for in raw strength. So they were still getting a ton of vertical displacement. They were still moving guys off the ball. Like I can't tell you how many SEC defensive tackles I was grading over the last couple of weeks where all my notes were just Stromberg kicked his ass, Stromberg kicked his ass. Like he's really good. He's going to go higher than people think. And to be honest, I think that, again, even though he's not a classic quote unquote zone center, he's good on zone runs because of how strong he is and technically developed he is. Like he's a very, very solid guy. Juice Scruggs is quicker than Stromberg. So if we want somebody who can execute those reach blocks in a classic sense of like, I'm going to do my bucket step, get to front side shoulder, pin him backside, all that kind of stuff. Like Juice Scruggs from Penn State is going to be that type of guy. I think that Chandler Zavala, even though he's a guard, could also play center. He's got the feet for it. Former soccer player, extremely nimble at 320 pounds. He's going to go, potentially in the third round. I think top of 4 at the absolute latest. Be a dream pick for the Cardinals in this system. And Joe Tippmann, I think he's a little bit different. He's gotten a lot of comparisons to Mitch Morse, which I think is very fair because he's a taller center. He's a bigger center, but he's very good in space. He's very good at pulling. And so if you want to do, in terms of how you execute the zone run system, if you want to do it kind of like how Dable does it in New York, where, okay, we're not doing a lot of the reach blocks and scoop blocks and stuff like that. It's more so we're doing fold adjustments where we pin with the guard and pull the center around just to make sure everybody has good angles. Tittman's the guy, if you don't get Schmitz, Tittman's the guy that you want for that, because he's really good at kind of getting out of there and getting in space and climbing to the second level. So it's a good center class, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to find somebody. They don't necessarily have to get Schmitz. Like, I'd prefer it.
Right.
But if they don't get him, like, all is not lost. They're going to get a fine center.
Well, one last name, because he, Schmitz is by far the guy we've loved the most, in all of our mock drafts. But recently we've been looking at Luke Whippler, because Tony Pauline, who last year was the guy who said they were taking Zaven Collins ahead of time. So, he certainly seems to know some people with info, said that they're going to take Luke Whippler. Now, obviously you don't know that because someone could jump ahead of them, but what do you think about Luke Whippler in this offense?
Yeah, I really don't think you can go wrong with him either. Again, he's not the same level of athlete as Schmitz or even Tittman. I don't say level. He's a different kind of athlete.
Right.
But, like, I mean, there's 8 centers they can take in this class and be fine. Like, I really, like, if they take Whippler because they want to address receiver at the top of the second or corner or whatever, and they feel like they can wait a little bit more to get a center, that's fine to me. Like, they don't have to take Schmitz. Again, I would love it.
Right.
He'd be play there forever. He'd start there forever. But, like, they're not screwed if they don't get him, is my point.
No, that's good to know. You mentioned Hopkins. What's going on with Hop?
I think the Cardinals are holding out for a pick that I don't believe they're going to get. From my understanding, they went into this thing saying, we want to get back what we paid, which was a 2. And I'm like, that was years ago at this point. Like, you were paying for Hopkins in his prime. You got a 2 from Houston and still got rid of David Johnson at the same time. So congrats to you. You fleeced Bill O'Brien, but other teams are not going to let you do the same.
Right.
He's, on the wrong side of 30 at this point, or he is 30. So he's probably only got a couple more years of, like, prime Hopkins left. He's expensive. And also, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that Hopkins has enough money in his career now where he has agency. And if he doesn't want to go somewhere, he's not going to go there.
Right.
Because whoever takes him on is going to have to work with him to get some sort of cap relief, because the Cardinals don't want to pay extra to give the other team. Like, they feel like they're taking it on the chin this year as it is, right? So they don't want to pay even more money to make it more agreeable for their trade partners' cap space. So then if they want to open up cap space, it has to come down to Hopkins being willing to deal, and Hopkins can kind of dictate where he goes by just saying no. Like, if it's the Chiefs, yeah, Hopkins would probably be amenable to doing something financially to make it easier because he wants to go get a ring. But he has the money now where he can kind of dictate where he wants to go, and he wants to get a ring. So that means Buffalo's on the table, KC's on the table. Baltimore, I think, was a maybe, but now that they have Odell, probably not. Pretty much any team that is not a lock, but likely to be in the playoffs that needs an X receiver is on the table for him. And I think that teams that are, like, middle of the pack probably aren't. I think that the deal that he'd be willing to do with the Giants is a lot different than the deal he'd be willing to do with the Chiefs. Right.
One team that for me has been maybe a dark horse. I don't know. What do you think about Jacksonville? They, kind of a young quarterback from Clemson. It's kind of the region in the South. Do you think they'd be a potential landing spot?
Do they even have the money? Let me look at their cap space.
Yeah.
So they have about almost 15 million, but keep in mind a bunch of that's going to go to rookies. So they would be another one of those teams where it's like, Hop, we need to do something with you, right?
You need to work with us.
But considering, again, they went on a run last year, they have a young dynamic quarterback, they have a good coach. I would bet Jacksonville's on the list of teams that Nuke would figure some stuff out with, right? So
yeah,
I could see it. I mean, him and Calvin Ridley and Etienne and, like,
Christian Kirk,
like, that'd be pretty sick,
right? Right.
So it'd be fun.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. Well, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball, because I think that's where there's a lot more questions and a lot more change going to be happening, right? So obviously Jonathan Gannon was DC, and with the Eagles, he brought his linebackers coach, Nick Rallis, over to be the defensive coordinator. So I think it's a pretty safe assumption that there's going to be a lot of similar philosophies from what we saw in Philadelphia in terms of how they're going to try to build this defense. Can you give us just a quick overview of what that defensive system is likely to look like?
So what's interesting about it is I'm not sure entirely, because what I do know is that a monumentally heavy influence on the Eagles defense last year was Vic Fangio, because Vic was on the staff. And it was published like a little bit, it was like August of last year, of like, oh, Vic's taking an advisory role, with the Eagles. Like, what people don't realize is, like, he had an office in Stanford because he lived up in the Bay. Like, Stanford had him in an office, or gave him an office, and he would roll in there every week, break down film, like do game planning, help with installs. Like, Fangio's fingerprints were all over that defense. And I know Gannon was calling it. Gannon was the DC and everything like that. But, like, I think the defense would have looked significantly different if Vic wasn't literally on the staff.
Right.
And I feel like people weren't really paying attention to that narrative until, like, the Miami hire happened and we're going in the Super Bowl, and it's like, is Vic staying for the Super Bowl? And all of a sudden people were like, Vic Fangio was coaching for the Eagles?
Right.
It's like, yeah, he was doing it the entire year. Like, he was on the staff. So I'm curious to see, now that Vic's in Miami, okay, what's when he is not in the room virtually every single day, what's it look like? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think that they're going to carry a bunch of stuff over, a bunch of Fangio-ish stuff over. And if they do, okay, you can expect a lot of 2 high safety structures. They're going to play a lot of quarters. They're going to play a lot of quarter, half, or half, quarter, which are 2 very different things. Like, quarter, half is we're playing quarters to the passing strength, half field safety to the weak side. Half, quarter is we're playing half field safety to the passing strength, quarters to the weak side. And that just depends on game plan and execution and all, or not even execution, game plan and matchups in terms of which one they're going to prioritize. And they both have different strengths and weaknesses. What Vic likes to do a lot is he'll roll down into cover 3 from 2 high structures, but he'll do it from both directions. So you never really know what side it's coming from. They do a whole bunch of really fun stuff in coverage on the back end. They don't necessarily blitz a lot. At least Fangio historically has not really blitzed a lot, but it doesn't mean they don't bring the linebackers. It's more so Dave Miranda calls them creepers, which it's like, it's a 4-man rush, but you're just bringing a different 4 than you expect. So, like, he will still do that, but he won't necessarily sacrifice bodies in coverage to bring the linebackers. It's more so we need to have a really athletic outside linebacker that we can drop into coverage so that we can bring one of the inside linebackers to add on a rusher to, the opposite side of whatever their slide is. So it's a very complex defense. It's a very creative defense. It's a defense that has had a lot of success over the last 10 years, more than that even. Going back to Fangio in the early 2010s with San Francisco, I'd say is like where that really started in terms of defenses around the league being like, okay, yeah, this is badass. Let's keep doing this. And I would imagine the Cardinals are going to have a bunch of elements of that this year. What I don't know, again, is just how much of the Eagles defense last year, which looked like a Fangio defense, how much of that was Gannon and how much of that was literally Vic Fangio because he was there the entire time.
One of the things that Gannon has said and repeatedly in his press conferences since joining the Cardinals is that he's going to really build a defense based on what the talent on the team is capable of, and then looking at matchups. So I think that jives with what you're saying, that it's not necessarily going to be a carbon copy of what we saw in Philly. They're probably going to cater it some to what they had. And as you mentioned, Fangio not being as heavily involved, it's probably going to look a little bit different. When you look at the talent on the Cardinals roster, and I know some would say I use that word talent generously in terms of what this roster looks like, but when you look at players like Budda Baker, Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins, Marco Wilson, who came on kind of last year, and Jalen Thompson, how do you see these players fitting, or I should say, What do you think Gannon and Rallis are going to do with some of these players?
So I'm really fascinated most by Isaiah Simmons. Because like I know that, okay, Buda's going to be the weak side safety. Jalen's going to be the strong side safety. Mainly because the weak side safety in this defense, again, we're assuming it's going to be heavily Fangio stuff. Weak side safety tends to be involved in run fits quite a bit. And Buda comes from depth and fits the run better than like any other safety in the league. So
Right.
I would say Buda is going to be weak side. Jalen's going to be strong side. And then but Isaiah Simmons is the one that I'm really fascinated by because I'm like, I don't know. He's not a nickel in this system. He's not a safety in this system. He's probably, and this might sound weird, he's probably a strong side outside linebacker, which is like a Leonard Floyd type role. And that's somebody who, again, is going to drop in coverage frequently, especially when they're doing all their crazy pressure paths and everything like that. Somebody who can rush off the edge, somebody who is going to be the read man on a lot of RPOs. So you need somebody who's really athletic and kind of, play both, or on the zone reads, I mean, not on the RPOs. And I kind of feel like, considering the athlete that is required to play Sam in this type of defense, I kind of feel like he fits that. And if not that, if they have somebody else in mind for that role, then I kind of feel like his best spot is if they're in a base look, which is like the closest we're going to get to like a traditional personnel package, like matching up against 12 and 21 personnel, like heavier bodies and everything like that. He's probably a will linebacker in that, something that gets kept clean and he could just, run and chase. And then in nickel, instead of playing nickel, where, okay, we do need like 4 actual pass rushers on the field, he's probably going to be what Nick Saban refers to as a money backer, which means he's an inside linebacker, but he aligns to the passing strength so that we can get him more involved with coverage and like carrying guys down the field, while Saban plays, the other side, which is more focused on run defense or matching running backs in coverage. So like right now he's on the depth chart as a nickel, and I'm like, there's no way to me that he plays nickel in this system because it's a totally different skill set. But I also think that he's a linebacker, but I just don't know which one yet. And so that's kind of something that I'm really fascinated by. And to be honest, the staff probably doesn't know yet either. Yeah. It's probably going to get worked out in camp. And that's something to really look at because he fits somewhere. I just don't know where yet.
Yeah, a lot of Cardinals fans are really wondering what they're going to do with him. I mean, the 5th-year option has not been exercised as far as I've heard. I think there's still some time to decide that. And he's been an interesting up and down prospect. Does some things really well. From my perspective, he's been surprisingly bad in coverage sometimes in terms of like just getting fooled, and kind of getting juked a little bit. Maybe overcommits. I don't know, but he's also graded well in pass rushing snaps, right? So that speaks to what you were talking about, in that Sam role. Shifting to the draft, but still on the defensive side, cornerback's a major area of need. What kind of cornerbacks do you think they're going to be looking for? And who are some of the cornerbacks in this class that fit that? And who are some that might not be an ideal fit schematically that they might not be looking at?
Press man, outside corners. This defense starts and ends with press man, outside corners. Like obviously they're not going to be taking one at 3. If they trade down, and at this point I'm assuming they're trading down. We don't know how far. Schefter put out the tweet, there's at minimum 6 teams that have called. That to me means that there's teams outside the top 10 that have called. So depending on what the deal is,
right,
they could be outside the top 10 or significantly outside the top 10. So we'll see where they go. I think that it's 100% chance they trade, or 98% chance they trade.
Right.
We just don't know where to yet. Now, if they want to get corner and maybe multiple corners, if Detroit comes calling and says like, hey, we'll give you 6 and 18 so we can go against Anthony Richardson. Honestly, I might take corner at both spots just because we can get Witherspoon or Gonzalez, who are both great press man corners on the outside. I mean, they're good at everything, but like they're great press man corners on the outside. And then at 18, like you're praying that Joey Porter falls, another great press man corner, because this system can't survive without it. Like even though it's a quote unquote zone based system, because we're playing a lot of quarters, it's all man coverage, just with like zone coverage principles. And like you need guys that can play press man. You need guys that can beat people up at the line of scrimmage. You literally can't run this defense without it. So like if Detroit comes calling and says we'll give 6 and 18, yes, so that we can get both of our corners and have this defense be functional. Because without those corners, it's like 30 points a game. Like, I'm sorry. That's just what it's going to be. Right. Like they need corner and they need it so badly.
Yeah. Are there corners that maybe aren't great at the press man that we've been doing so many mock drafts. I do a mock draft show every Monday. So we know corners the need, we know who the names are, but who are some of the guys that people are talking about, but you're like, well, for this system, maybe that's a guy you want to pass on.
Oh, that's a tough one, because I think that to a degree, almost everybody in this class fits to a degree. Like there's very few guys that I think are like absolutely shitty in press man. I guess technically Clark Phillips, even though like I would see him more as a nickel in this system anyway.
Right.
Because like I compare him to Brandon Boykin, if you remember him at Georgia, and then he went to the Eagles and he was a really top tier nickel before injuries took his career. But like if you're projecting him as an outside corner, like, yeah, he probably doesn't fit. But if you think of him as a nickel, then all of a sudden it's a lot more palatable. I know Emmanuel Forbes could work in this system if we're swapping corner sides based on passing strength, because typically it's more so against trips look than anything else. In a lot of different looks that they run, like the passing strength corner against trips will play more off. Like you look at like the Rams defense from a couple years ago. God, who was it that was opposite of Jalen Ramsey? The name is escaping me right now, but he was always like 8 yards off, and he was always playing, some sort of combo zone to the passing strength. And he was really, really good at it. It's like Emmanuel Forbes, I think, at 166, when I was up to 170 pounds, like, yeah, I don't know about press for him.
Right.
But in terms of that type of corner, which has been used in this system before, of like every time, you put him on the passing strength side, he's playing off, and we're playing some sort of zone to that side. I think he fits that because his feet are phenomenal. His burst is crazy. He has the best ball skills of any DB I've seen in the last 5 years. He has 14 picks over the last 3 years. He's led all of college football in pick sixes over that time. Like, he's an insanely good corner in terms of breaking the ball and getting the ball. And if we want one press guy to just take away the X backside and then have like one sneaky off corner, like in the Asante Samuel Jr. mold on the other side, Forbes is probably it. So again, you don't necessarily need both to be press corners, but you need at least one. You need at least one of those guys to be a press corner, or like the defense just won't work.
Right. So when we look at the other areas, I mean, defensive line and edge are massive. It probably on the defense, as much as we need corners, it feels like we're really lacking also on the line. What do you think they're going to be looking for in terms of types of players, and maybe some players that fit that in this draft class?
Right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like projected, if you look at it as like a starting five, right? Because they play a lot of 5-man services in base, they play 4-man service in nickel. If we're looking at starting five, it's on the interior 3, Ledbetter, Lecky Fotu, and Rashard Lawrence. And then on the edges, we got Myjai Sanders and Cam Thomas. Is that kind of, is that what you're thinking too?
So here's what I would think. I would think that they would play Lawrence more kind of that nose, maybe get Lecky Fotu in there, rotate Ledbetter, maybe move Cam Thomas in a little bit, like 3 technique, kind of like he really
can theoretically.
And if they're drafting an edge, which a lot of people think they will, they might do that more. Obviously, they're going to do multiple fronts, so it could move around. So I think, Collier, let's see what they do with him, right? And if they draft someone. But as it stands, I think what you described with maybe a little bit of Cam Thomas moved inside some from time to time is probably what they would be running with their current personnel.
And given that projected starting 5-ish, in terms of nickel, it's probably Sanders, Thomas on the outside, and then I guess Fotu and Lawrence on the inside. Given that, I think interior is more of a priority than edge. Not that edge shouldn't be taken. It should. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like we need to fix this.
Right.
I would say interior is a higher priority, and they really need guys that can plug the run. Mm-hmm. Like desperately need guys that can plug the run. Because again, how this defense creates pressure is often more through scheme than just straight up like we're rushing for somebody go win. Like obviously they do that, and you need good edge rushers so that you can do that. But all of their pressures created on 3rd and 7 are generally, okay, you have one badass pass rusher that you're given a one-on-one, but the other 3 guys is some combination of outside linebackers, inside linebackers, and defensive linemen that are doing some crazy ass twist or stunt or mm-hmm. something like that. And so for me, the key is knowing that we're going to rely on scheme to get a lot of pressure and stunts to get a lot of pressure more than just straight up 4-man rushes. My priority is getting to the 3rd and 7 in the first place. Mm-hmm. And you can't get to that 3rd and 7 in the first place without interior defensive linemen that are badasses against the run.
Right.
So I look at Mozzie Smith from Michigan. Yeah. I look at Jared Clark from Coastal Carolina. I look at Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. Like we need guys, from nose out to 3. Mm-hmm. Even out to 5 tech, like Keanu Benton, I think is both a 3 technique and a 5 technique. We need dudes with beef that could stop the run. And if they can contribute as a pass rusher, great. Like Benton absolutely contributes as a pass rusher. Clark definitely contributes as a pass rusher. Mozzie Smith, less so, but he can still do it. Mm-hmm. If they contribute as a pass rusher, that's a bonus. Really, I mainly need them to set up stunts for everybody else. But we got to stop the run here. Or we're never getting a 3rd and 7, which means we're never getting sacks.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Couple of things I want to ask you about before we get you out of here. Real quick, is there anything you're hearing about the Cardinals in terms of players they're looking at, or anything that you can share with us? Just any insights from all the things you're hearing.
What I'm hearing is that they're definitely getting out of pick 3,
right?
And they are weighing a whole lot of offers, and they are all extraordinarily lucrative. And so I understand there's a lot of Cardinals fans that are like Will Anderson or bust. Mm-hmm. I don't think Will Anderson is a Cardinal. Not that he's not a great player, but they're weighing the possibility of a potentially franchise-changing amount of picks.
Yeah.
Or one edge rusher when they know they're going to be bad this year anyway. Like Kyler's not coming back probably till Thanksgiving. They're not winning a whole lot of games without Kyler. Like I love Colt McCoy. Sorry, not happening. Yeah. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be a good team down the stretch when Kyler gets back, theoretically, or at least like a passable team down the stretch. But like, I think by the time Kyler gets back and he looks like Kyler, they're going to be so far behind. This is going to be a lost season. So why are we taking an edge rusher when we're not really expecting to compete for the NFC right now?
We're not one player away.
You're not one player away. You're a lot of players away.
Right.
And there's an opportunity to get a lot of players by trading that 3rd overall pick for Anthony Richardson, which is who will go 3rd overall, in my opinion. So it's nice to dream about Anderson as a Cardinal. When I did my mock draft, I put Anderson as a Cardinal. It's awesome. He'd fit there. He'd be great there. They need so much more. They need corners. They need interior defensive line. They need a center. They need a receiver. They need a lot.
Right.
So Cardinals fans, be patient on draft day because it might take a while to pick. I don't know where they're going to pick. They're weighing a lot of offers, and no matter what, I think they're going to get a lot of picks.
Mm-hmm. I've been on that train for a while that they're likely to trade back. Osfort comes from the Patriots organization. They like to trade back. I had a conversation with Eric Eager about this. If you don't need a quarterback, you trade back. So there are still the Will Anderson or bust crowd, but I think a lot of Cardinals fans have made their peace with that. One last question then I'll get you out of here. Last year, the football gods decided to throw a long-suffering Texans fan a bone and allowed Thomas Booker to be drafted by Houston. So who's this year's Booker, a day 3 prospect that you just really like and hope that your Texans acquire?
Ooh, that's a really good one. Day 3 that I really hope they acquire. Just because the Texans need so much, but I'll kind of stick at edge here just because this edge class is so insane. There's going to be guys on day 3 that I really, really like. I'll go with Yasir Abdullah.
Okay.
From
You had a nice
Louisville.
interview with him. I saw that. That was great.
He's great to talk to. He was a super productive pass rusher at Louisville, even though he's an undersized guy. He's like 6'1", 240. He's Hassan Reddick size. And my comp for him is Kyle Van Noy with a jetpack on, because he's a hybrid off-ball linebacker / edge, wicked first step, held up in coverage just fine. He's got 4.4 speed. Like, there was an interception they had. I can't remember what team it was against, where they ran a receiver on jet motion and then wheeled him up the boundary. And again, he's a linebacker, and he's like, "Oh shit, I gotta match this." And so he got on his horse and ran down the sideline with this receiver running 4.4, did the arm bar, everything like that, and then picked off the pass. Like, the quarterback was like, "How the hell did you do that? You're a linebacker." So I really like Yasir Abdullah. Again, he's probably going to go on day 3 because of size, but he's super explosive, super productive, very smart, great dude. And I think he's going to be, as long as he's used correctly, I think he's going to be a really, really good pro.
Nice. Well, I know you got to get out of here. I'm going to have all of your links in the description: Bootleg Football Podcast, your primary channel, your social media. If you aren't following Brett Kollmann, you're doing it wrong. He is the best guy to follow in this space. Brett, thank you for your time. We'll touch base somewhere down the road. I appreciate you making time for me.
Thank you for having me on.